touch on, well, I see the sequence of events there, right?
I'm sorry?
I see the sequence of events there with
Yeah.
the flow chart. But you didn't touch on the aspect of information and how imperfect it can be, or you know, the need for it to be perfect in order for those sequence of events to occur. For example, you know, if one was to go into a store and didn't know the price of a certain product, you know, how would one be able to deduce, hey, this is a fair price compared to another price?
Well, that's what I understand what you're saying, but that's sort of, first of all, it's not saying that the market needs full information. The fact is the market generates information. We start in ignorance. It's not of saying, well, let's imagine a world with perfect information and then compare the world because it's imperfect and judge it as imperfect. We should start as our benchmark that we start with imperfect information. I don't know anything about anybody except a very small circle of people who I happen to interact with for one reason or another. And I don't even know everything about them. They wouldn't want me to know everything about them. Do you want people to know everything about you? I see, you're smiling, it's true. What don't you want to share? Come on. Okay, but you know what I'm saying. So we start out in ignorance. It's the market that begins to generate information by people seeing profit opportunities, and they say, look here, I can make it better for you. Oh, that's the price? I can offer it to you for less. Oh, I can make it a new product that hasn't been offered before, and this is the price at which I can offer it in comparison to the prices that existing products are being sold for. And information therefore gets dispersed and disseminated through the emergence of markets and the further integration of prices. Price information is spread throughout the world. Just think of commodities markets, futures markets. Anything that happens in a commodities or futures or an exchange market in Tokyo is almost instantaneously known in London, New York, in Nassau. Particularly with the technologies of the internet now. Or the cell phone, where you can have your apps to be seeing what markets are doing instantaneously. Any change that happens in the supply of available good starts rippling through to inform others in the marketplace that it is either more available or less, because that's what perfect information is. You know everything that would in some way be pertinent or relevant to any decision being made now and in the future. There's a famous philosopher of science named Karl Popper. He used to teach at the London School of Economics. And he once pointed out that if we make one simple assumption, commonsensical assumption, and that assumption is that knowledge grows, that there are things we'll know tomorrow that we don't know today. And I think we all commonsensically accept that. You've learned things since you came to the college that you didn't know before you came to the college. Everybody experiences new knowledge. If you accept that, then it is impossible to predict the future. Because how can you predict things today that you'll only learn about tomorrow? It's a logical inconsistency. Because if you could know what's going to happen tomorrow today, then it's not tomorrow's knowledge, it's today's knowledge. Indeed, the entire future collapses into the present. Okay? So there's always the fact that we cannot have perfect knowledge. Because perfect knowledge would have to include anything that's relevant or important to any decision we make today that can also have impact and relevance for tomorrow. But we can't know everything that's going to happen tomorrow because we cannot know what we'll know tomorrow until tomorrow comes. So by definition, it is impossible to have perfect knowledge. But what we can do with the market, in markets and prices, is that they can be spreading out information and devising ways of attempting to give the most informed amounts and types of information, both in the present and looking over the future with forward markets. But other than that, that's the best we can do. If you try to judge the world by some hypothetical perfect standard that can never be attained, the real world will always seem to fall short. The way I explain this to my students in class sometimes is I'll say, imagine that you were shown one of these Greek statues that are, you know, from the ancient Greece that are meant to represent the physical ideal of the perfect man, the perfect woman. How many of us match up to that image of, you know, physically the perfect man, the perfect woman? I mean, we all fall short in some way, shape, or form, right? Okay. So that would mean that if we use that as the ideal, we all fall short of that ideal. If we use an image, and therefore we're always going to have this sense of imperfection, frustration, falling short. If we judge the market by some hypothetical world of perfect knowledge and perfect information about all things relevant in the present and the future that you should know to never make a wrong decision, then you're setting up a standard that no one can ever meet, and therefore judging it by the wrong benchmark. The right benchmark is which system enables us to have more information, dispersed more effectively, and more adaptively to informing us when any changes occur in circumstances that might be relevant for things that we're doing. And that certainly is an open competitive market. It adapts and adjusts and informs as quickly as circumstances, human knowledge, and technology permits. Yeah.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about it was a saying that absolute power creates absolute corruption. And even in this year, it's still, you ended with a price system. And it brought to mind what we were speaking about when we were talking about the employee, the value of labor going from one employee to the other. And you said the price system is based on what you and others are willing to pay. So in a way you were saying, I mean to me you were saying that the value of one labor could be, you can calculate it by what another labor was doing at that time. And in all this, there has to be some sort of guidelines placed by somebody. And right now we rely on the government.
How, in what way do you rely upon the government to do these things?
You rely on the government to look after the common good.
How do they know what the common good is?
The common good would be through the people, through what the people would say would be the common good, because most, like in our society, we have elected people, and they would say that, hey, I believe in this, and you would be like, hey, I don't believe in that. You are, for the most part, right? And what I'm saying in all this is that you have this free market system. If in this market, you still have to put in the human element dealing with everything right down to, right to the very end, what we're going to be paid, right? You mentioned Microsoft. Microsoft just had several years ago, they had a conflict of interest and they had legal problems. And we could always see that in one side or the other. Either in government, corruption. And then you have the free market, big business, corruption. So I'm saying in myself, you need a meeting in these two, I don't know how to say, these two principles. There has to be some sort of duality. Otherwise, one would always go towards ruination, the other, the same thing.
Well, you know, okay, let me sort of put it this way. To begin with, I think that once we use terms like the common good or general welfare, the public interest, if you start thinking about them in empty terms, it all sounds good. Oh, the common good. But now you get among a group of people, and you start asking, well, what do you think the common good is? You find that there's a diversity of views when it comes to specific concrete matters, which means that each individual has a different conception of what is good for themselves or they might consider to be good for others. The advantage of the marketplace, it does not impose one conception of the common good on everyone. For example, you go to the supermarket. Okay, you go to the supermarket and you have your cart and you're going down the aisles in the supermarket. You take your breakfast cereal, you take your can of beans, you take your eggs, you take this, that, and there's your basket, and you go to the checkout counter, right? The aisle, the checkout aisle. And now you look at everybody else who's been doing the same. And they put different goods in their basket, or even if they've put similar goods, probably